I bought a watch, you're probably not surprised. But this one is a very weird watch. My last watch that I bought was also very weird. That one was made out of meteorite, it was a jump hour, and it had a lot of really weird details. This watch is also a jump hour, however, it also gets retrograde minutes and seconds. It's a GMT, it's extremely complicated, very weird looking, and it's from a brand that no longer exists. It's also one of the brands that I talk about here on my channel from time to time in videos where I am talking about luxury watches that sell for a great price on the secondary market. This one is actually new old stock from the early 2000s. So let's flip the camera and take a look at my latest purchase, which I got for a great price. It's an amazing watch and I'm very excited to show you guys. It is a De Grossono FG1. So just this past weekend I made a video where I was talking about some really underrated luxury watches that sell for great prices on the secondary market. It's one of those videos that I love to make. The actual research that I do for those videos isn't really research, it's me just shopping for watches and discovering these things, and sometimes I mark them down and sometimes I don't. Usually all of these different watches are found in my search on my saved searches on eBay. That's where I keep a lot of this. And it's not that I'm going to eBay to find these watches exclusively. I use that search as sort of a guide to the watches that I want to look up and remind myself of certain watches. And this is one of those watches that has been on my radar for a very long time. I've made videos about this brand and they've been around for a very long time. They are being restarted in some way, and I don't know how that's going to work, but I believe that this brand there is a company that bought it and they are starting it over again. When they came out with this watch, they had been a very established brand. They've been making watches had been making watches for a very long time. They went out of business in, I want to say it was 2022. I don't know entirely the moment that they went out of business, but I believe it was around that time. I could be completely wrong. What they were doing when they were in business were very odd watches like this. Odd shapes, very odd lugs. A lot of their watches had either articulating lugs or lugs that were meant to be sort of different from the case. You could see that there's lines engraved in the case, but the lugs are not. And sometimes they actually leave the lugs without a DLC coating, and sometimes they DLC coat the lugs like you see here. So very odd choices. They made this in gold, they made it in stainless steel. Stainless steel was actually the option that I wanted, but this one came up. It was new old stock, so it was brand new. It had stickers on it. It's working very well. Even though it's new old stock, it's been sitting around for a long time. It is working. And you can see here, it is a very complicated watch. Now, this brand worked with a lot of high-end manufacturers to make their movements. Most of their movements were powered by a standard 2892. Now, I said standard. The movement is a standard movement, but they would take them apart and completely overhaul them. All of them were essentially unrecognizable by the time they were put into one of these watches. Most of them had some sort of cool complication. Either it was a GMT with two different physical displays, so you had a large time section and then a small time section, things like that, or you had complications like this. This is a jump hour, so you have the jump hour right below that. It's not really 12 o'clock because that's a retrograde. So it's right below the 30 on that retrograde scale. So this is a retrograde hour, this is a retrograde minutes, and then you have the jump hour right there in the center of that retrograde. Right below that, obviously you have the time here, the hour and minutes in the central position there. Right below that you have the GMT, because this is a GMT as well. So there's a GMT, a large GMT window. In a completely separate dial, as you can see here, this is a separate dial under a separate curved sapphire crystal. Both of these get curved sapphire crystals. There is a retrograde seconds and a day-night indicator, a very large day-night indicator. So There is two retrograde functions, a jump hour, a GMT, and a day-night indicator powered by a 2892. But like I was saying before, they worked with some very high-end manufacturers to make these watches. One was Christophe Claret, another was Ingenieur. Now, we don't know which ones actually had their hands on this watch, but they did work on their higher end complications and some of their other complications that they made for other watches. So this could have been made by Ingenieur, it could have been made by Christophe Claret, or at least the module that would go on top of that 2892 or 2895 or 2893, whatever they used for this specific watch or whatever watch they were using it for. There were a lot of modules that they were putting that were in-house to de Grossono. So that's the whole point here. These are very high-end watches. Now, the brand itself started in jewelry. They decided they wanted to go into watches, like many other manufacturers, like Cartier, like Chopard. But they went all in. They knew they had to compete, and they had to compete with a lot of stiff competition, like Chopard, who were making very cool watches back then as well. Of course, Cartier, Bulgari, there are tons of jewelry brands that decided to make watches, and they went in full force. And they came up with some really cool watches. Now, this is a rectangular shaped case. So you can see here, it is polished on the sides. You have very large screws that hold in these lugs, and then you have pin buckles for the strap. Now, I replaced the strap on here almost immediately. This is a Strapistry strap. One of my friends from the Gotham Watch Club owns the Strapistry watch strap company. So he helped me with this strap, which is a corduroy, a brown corduroy strap that is made with suede. And then I had this buckle, which just has a well, it's a clasp that has my old Watch Curse logo, the original Watch Curse logo, and that's why I had this made. I really love it. But I added it to this brown corduroy, which looks, I think, really good with the black case. I think black and brown, for me, goes together pretty well. I know my wife always tells me it doesn't match, but I like the way it looks, so that's the reason why I did it. Again, not a lot of people are going to like this watch. When I show you guys the watches that I buy, I always have to say that because a lot of the watches that I buy are very polarizing. The watch that I have on my wrist is very polarizing. I'm going to show you that, of course, in just a few seconds when I throw this on my wrist. But if you look at their very high-end watches, now this was a high-end watch. This was around $17,000, $18,000 when it was new back then. If they were making this now, I would imagine they would charge even more than that because of things like inflation and just the overall cost of materials. It's much higher now, so I would imagine this would be over $20,000. They were making watches back then that were costing in the $300,000 range. They were one of the first brands to come out with a digital mechanical watch. So this was essentially, it looked like a digital watch, but it was actually mechanical. If I have a photo of that watch, I will throw it up on the screen. It was insane. Now that was basically a Christophe Claret. Also, they came out with a minute repeater that had this beautiful, there was almost like an aperture that opened and it chimed out the hours and minutes, obviously, but there was this aperture. It was almost like a photographic aperture, like a camera aperture that would open and close. Very cool. And that was, again, made by Christophe Claret, I believe. So there's not a lot of information on that, but there is some information about Christophe Claret working with de Grossono. So that's the reason why it's speculated that he worked directly on those watches. And then Ingenieur, obviously another very big player in the watch industry in general, making watches for MB&F and a lot of very high-end watch brands like Moser and a few others. They also worked on a lot of these watches, and including this one. I believe it is Ingenieur who made the module on top of this movement. Like I said, I like polarizing watches, and this is yet another polarizing watch. I've been talking about this watch ever since I got it because I love it so much. I think it's just the coolest looking, weird, odd piece of material that you could get, and you put it into, you know, a watch form, and here you go. It's a piece of meteorite. It's a solid piece of meteorite. And then you can see a theme here. I like stripy watches because it has these stripes in the case. It's a jump hour. It's very Art Deco. It's in line with what we're looking at today, but completely different, a completely different design. But at the same time, kind of in the same vein. This is a David Rudden in solid meteorite with a Christopher Ward movement inside. It is their in-house SH21 with their JJ01 jump hour module on top. You will probably never ever see one of these in person, and I just kind of like that. I am the only person that I know that has this watch, and I've never seen another. And there it is on my 7.5-inch wrist, and I have to say, this wears comfortably. It looks really good on my wrist. This is around a 33 millimeter watch. It's actually spot on at 33 millimeters throughout the entire case. So it is thin, or not wide, I should say. It's around 11 millimeters thick. So it's not incredibly thick. It's the lug to lug here. So it's 56 millimeters lug to lug. These do articulate, but just maybe a half a millimeter. I think that they are really useful on some of their other designs. I think this design, it didn't work as well, but they have some other designs that are really very articulating. These articulate a little bit less on this design. With that being said, I think it looks really good on this brown strap. I really love the contrast between the corduroy and the lines on the case. I think it just looks so cool. And then, of course, you have that retrograde seconds, which is always doing something interesting because it's always flying back. And once in a while, you catch it. And I know that is difficult to do. A retrograde seconds is very, very rough on a movement because it has to constantly fly back. And it's flying back every 60 seconds. So it's not like a retrograde minutes, which is less prone to break. Retrograde seconds is more prone to break. Now, servicing on this, I would imagine, would be a little bit difficult, but the brand is coming back. So keep that in mind. I would imagine they will be able to service these once it does come back. Now, the price that I paid for this does not get Lume, unfortunately. Neither does that David Rudden, which I was pretty disappointed about. But I will say that this is just a very odd watch, and it's a very fun watch. I think that's fine. The fact that it doesn't have any Lume is completely okay with me. The price on this is, well, like I said, originally around $18,000, but what I paid is $2,995. It was brand new in the box with papers and the stickers attached to the case, so it was basically covered in plastic. That is an excellent price. And there are so many little details on this watch. I'll do close-ups of what I'm talking about, but when you look at the case itself versus the dial and versus the crystals, you'll see that essentially this is a curved case as well, and the dials are flat in the case. One is slightly higher than the other, so that seconds is slightly higher than the hours and the minutes. But when you look at it from its side, you'll see that this side of the dial is way closer to the sapphire crystal, which is curved, than this side of the dial, and the same thing goes for here versus there. So there is basically like a curved sapphire crystal, a curved case with flat dials underneath, and it just adds a lot of depth and makes it look really interesting, especially with those lines which are cut with a lathe in the case. And it looks a lot like a Urwerk 103. A lot of people said they thought it was an Urwerk, especially, again, you could see with that David Rudden, a lot of people think that was an Urwerk as well. It's not. It has a lot of inspiration from Urwerk. This came out after Urwerk, so maybe they were inspired by that. I don't know. But either way, I think they came out with something that was equally as cool. I paid just under $3,000 for it, which seems like a lot of money, but when you look at a watch like this versus brands like Ahsoka Lowtech, I know it sounds like I am picking on them because I constantly bring them up, but you go on the primary market and buy one of those watches for $3,000, which has got a $10 movement inside, or go on the secondary market and pay $6,000 to $15,000 for one of those watches, which, by the way, it still has a $10 movement inside. Or you could buy something like this, which Christophe Claret and Ingenieur possibly had a hand in making. It's extremely complicated. It has a already high-end ETA movement inside that is completely reworked. Just that process is extremely hard. So think about what Ming do to those movements that they use, those Salida movements that they use. They completely rework them. That's what these guys used to do. I'll throw up some pictures of some of those movements so you can see what I'm talking about. You don't get a display case back on this, unfortunately. I would say that's probably my only complaint about this. I have one other complaint. It's really hard to tell the time on this, but I mean, it's not that hard, but it is hard. The window is large for a jump hour. It's not tiny, but it's, you know, on the smaller side. I wish it was bigger like the Christopher Ward, which you could see, what I call it a Christopher Ward, like the David Rudden. You could see it at a glance. So this one, you have to look a little bit closer, so it's a little bit harder. The minutes are easy to read. The seconds are very easy to read, but it's those jump hours that are a little bit difficult because it's a white background. If they did it with a black background with white text, I think it would be easier to read. Unfortunately, they went the other direction, and I think it would have been smarter with a color matched background. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this watch? What do you think of my latest purchase? What do you think of my watch collection? You guys see the watches that I buy. Be brutally honest. It doesn't hurt my feelings. In fact, I like when people criticize my watches because it makes me look at them in a different way. So I'm not going to sell them, but I'm not afraid of getting criticism. It doesn't bother me in any way. I've made the decision because I like this watch. I always have. And that's just who I am. If you agree with me and you love the watch, I'm glad to hear that as well. You know, just as glad. Maybe a little bit more glad. But you know what I mean. Tell me down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It is super helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much for logging on. Thank you for watching this video. I will catch you guys in the next video.